guys. You're on live with Joe Leonardo and Alexander Turbin, comic books from coast to coast. I'm Joe Leonardo. I'm hanging out with my buddy Alexander Turbin. What's going on, Alex?
I'm doing great today. How are you?
Oh, I'm well. I'm well. Today we're going to be discussing a couple of our actual winners.
Yeah, we're going over the winners, some of the winners now. We've had how many? I think we've had 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe we've had 12. 12. I can't remember how many polls we've had now. But anyway, we've had a bunch of winners, and so we're going up to the we're leveling up, I think, in video game terminology. And today we're going to be looking at Mark Silvestri and Dale Keown, two of our favorite artists. And Joe's going to be looking at Dale, and I'm going to be looking at Mark Silvestri. So after the video is done, go and vote for who you like better.
Yeah, we had some cool votes. The last one, it was Wendy Pini and Chester Brown.
Oh yeah, yep. And Wendy just crushed Chester. Poor Chester.
Which is, I mean, as far as their art, Wendy is she's a hard artist for anybody to probably compete against. Like I stated in the last video, I place her on a very high pedestal, not only of like comic book creators, but just like as people who's like, you will never look at Wendy Pini piece and mistake it for anybody else.
Yeah. It's so hard. It's so hard when we're doing this because every artist is their own individual person and they have their own individual styles and some gravitate, some fans gravitate to one artist style more than the other, or and also we were talking about the what they produce, like Chester Brown does the indie, almost autobiographical stuff, and Wendy does the fantasy sci-fi stuff, and so genres have a lot to do with what somebody will like or not.
Yeah, I think that's
anyway.
Fair enough. And I mean, Chester Brown is a humor guy, and like you said, he's very autobiographical. He's a slice of life guy, you know what I mean? And that's I think, that's always gonna apply to probably a smaller audience than like the fantasy thing, which is a broader stroke. That's gonna probably have an easier time attracting a larger scale audience. I mean, so it's not like either one of these artists are, and as we said in times in the past, like all these artists are fantastic, and we just are like putting up these polls because we just like to hear what people think about them, because we're featuring these artists because they're meaningful to us and we enjoy their work so much, and we're fans of everything these guys do. So
yeah. And I'm mostly I've always been mostly interested in why people like one artist over another artist and what they do that is different than anybody else and stuff like that. So much of it is you just say the word style. And I think you can kind of dissect the word style and because it's so nebulous. It's not like a real thing. It's just, you do it, you kind of don't think about it. But if we do think about it, then maybe we can, either replicate things that we like or, discard the things that we don't like and stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. Really quickly, just going to say a quick hi to Eli Cruz and Danny Diaz, both who pop up on the chat. Thanks for coming by, guys. If you'd like to leave a comment or discuss any of the things we're discussing, by all means, please leave a comment. But yeah, style is just a word that you use to speak of the tiny intricacies that make your work appear unique compared to others. You know what I mean, dude? It's like that's just what style is. Like style is like something we all like strive for, but at the same time, it's what defines you, and it's an incomprehensible thing to chase because it only comes accidentally. You know what I mean? It's like oftentimes you may not even see the things that other people see. Like you're, it was interesting because like I've heard like a lot of people have asked me about Mark Silvestri, and I've like watch a lot of videos online and stuff, and I've heard quite a few people talk about his art and how like it's hard to find him talking about his art very much. And
Huh.
everyone's like, "Oh, who is he influenced by? Where does his styles come from?" And I recently saw a really great video where he was talking about it, and it was very interesting. And when he mentioned the two styles that define his look, it like snapped into place in my head, and you could instantly see it. And it's
Yeah.
and it's funny because you could look at his work for forever and never understand it until you hear him say it out loud, and then you could look at it and instantly go, "Oh, I see both of those things." And what he was saying was, first of all, it was John Buscema. He goes, "Nobody
Yeah.
draws a character sitting in repose better than John Buscema." And he goes, and you have
Yeah.
to understand, he goes, John's work is what first brought me onto
Yeah.
doing comics in the first place. He began his run of professional comics, I believe, working on Conan. And I'm not sure. I think he did a little bit of the comics, and I think he did a handful of things for Savage Sword.
Mark Silvestri did?
Yeah, that's where he began his career.
Oh,
Yeah. Before he did any of the X-Men stuff, what happens is Chris Claremont sees him on, it's either Conan or Savage Sword, and sees what he's doing and goes, "Oh wow, this guy's great! Like I need to get this guy over here. Let's get this guy on the X-Men and see what he could do." And I think he does. Gangster. Hold on, Gangster Polo G is a comedy that he said his favorite comic book is Goku versus DC. I love it when DC does like the versus stuff, like whether it's like Godzilla or DC versus King Kong or they do those all understand like that. But
so I don't know anything about Goku.
But yeah, he was Goku is Dragon Ball Z.
Right.
Yeah. But like he's talking about us. John Buscema was his first real big influence, and he said the second one is Walter Simonson. Now, when you take, what so Walter Simonson is really famous for is those jagged edges, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How every character and everything he draws is built on these convexing lines that don't have that much roundness. You know what I mean? Like everything always connects like in a point like this in his work, whatever. Like when he does a bicep or something, it's never like a roundness. And then when you add that slight angularness to the high level of rendering of like John Buscema, you get Mark Silvestri.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. Like Simonson is like, if there's anything I would ever say about his art is that it's dynamic, and Silvestri follows suit. His stuff is super dynamic.
Yeah, like when you look at
that's the biggest,
the sharp angles of the faces and stuff like that. The kind of sharp angle thing that he always does, and how but you take that level of detail and rendering that Buscema is doing, you know what I mean? Put those two things together, and this is where you end up with, like this kind of thing right here, where he's just like very highly detailed rendering and beautiful faces. Yeah, I was like really like kind of like blown away by that when he started talking about it, because it just instantly made so much sense to me. I was just like, wow. That's rad.
Yeah, definitely. His line work definitely looks a lot like Buscema could
and it's just like
his own way.
It's like you meld, and it's like it's funny because like you as an artist, who like influences, and you'll always say the same things. Like someone will be like, "Who you like?" and you're like, "Oh, this guy and this guy," or whatever.
Right.
But like other people will not necessarily see that in your work, even though you may work hard to imply all those things that those guys do to your work. By mixing them together, you get a slightly different ingredient. You know what I mean? You get a slightly different pot of stew or whatever. You know what I mean? Than the last guy made. So you think it's like, oh, I'm so derivative of someone else. And then that's where like styles come from. You know what I mean? Because you're meshing two things together that people don't necessarily see.
Is there anything in particular when you're drawing that you say, I'm going to try to get it to look or like, I really like this kind of thing, so I'm going to try to emulate that as much as I can?
I think there is, but it's a generality with my kind of work. And like, it's just like and I'm a real grab bag kind of guy when I say that. Like I go like I'll go through the internet, like I'm looking at all kinds of different artists, all kinds of different art. Well, I mean, most of it's storytelling art, whether one form or another of some kind, But I mean, I just try to absorb a lot, and I'm just always looking at what people are doing. Like, oh, what do they do to do a wall? What texture are they using to do a desk? What kind of texture do they put on a floor? What kind of texture do they put on a doorknob? You know what I mean? Like,
right,
just
right.
everything
I do that too.
everywhere. You know, everything
For
everywhere.
me in particular, when I'm drawing ankles, I think of Arthur Adams. Like whenever every ankle I've ever drawn, I think has been like I've thought about Arthur Adams because I just think he just does the best ankles and stuff like that. So
I'm a
that's
big
just one
Arthur
of the
Adams
things that I
guy.
think about. What's
Yeah,
that?
like I'm a big Arthur Adams dude, and he's definitely like that's that's a really good example of like I will like say if I'm drawing a jungle or I have to draw something like a complicated uh alleyway or something like that, I will look at a bunch of Arthur Adams stuff. Like I'll go through the internet and I'll just scour Arthur Adams stuff looking for things that he does. How does he do a garbage can? How does he do it?
Right.
And especially like jungle things like, how does Arthur Adams approach, a bunch of bushes? How does he do a bunch of trees in the background? You know what I mean? And the same thing. Oh, am I going to draw a bunch of dead trees in the snow? How does Arthur Adams draw dead trees? You know what I mean, dude? Like I will always look at his stuff, and then I often will emulate it. Now I'm not copying things directly, but I'll emulate the concept or whatever.
Right. No, it's like the ankle is idea. I won't like be looking at Arthur. It's just remembering all of the stuff that he's done and the way he does it. I'll that and pretty much draw that
He's
as
one of
much
those
as I can.
amazing guys, dude. He just does everything. He's one of those guys that could draw so many people in the shot. You know what I mean? There's just not like no, like you know what I mean? You could just tell him to draw a billion people, and he'll draw a billion people. You know what I mean? He'll look rad.
He's going to be a hard one for us to put somebody up against.
Yeah, maybe like Bernie
he's just one of
Wrightson or
those.
someone like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
one of those.
Yeah, he might be a top 10, top 5 favorite,
or like a Brian Boland or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
maybe. I don't know. These polls are going to get harder and harder when as they progress, which is awesome.
Yeah, and that's what's we just want people to just state their minds and just say what they think about the art too. And if you have a comment that maybe like why you guys like it so much or the things that you guys enjoy about it, but like I mean, Marc Silvestri is really good at telling a story too. You know, I mean, he's comes from the classical like older style, and he moved to the image thing later on. Like it wasn't his thing at the beginning. He came in as a classic Marvel guy, having to do the classic Marvel style of middle level storytelling, where you have to get a lot on the page, and he's capable of that. He's capable of, telling very complex, tiny little postage stamp size images that will give you a lot of story in a short amount of area. And that's important too. If you don't want your book to be 80 pages long, you know what I mean? Like you got to learn how to tell, stories.
Yeah, definitely. But you're going to go over Dale Keown, right?
Yeah.
You got some
we're
Dale
going
Keown
over
stuff?
both of them together. And it's funny that I just happen to also have Dale Keown's Darkness here too, because Darkness is just a comic. And even though Mark did make it up, a lot of different artists have worked on the, Walt Spaghetti Show and
definitely.
And this is a beautiful try and got not too much glare on here. And this is
what number is that?
This has got to be a reboot of some kind, because it says it's number 2, but we know that this must be like maybe volume 2, number 2 or something like that.
That's not the Garth Ennis isn't writing that, is he?
Paul Jenkins.
Oh, Paul Jenkins.
Yeah, Paul Jenkins. The Garth Ennis is on the original run, so he's gone by now. He's
he did the original.
Guy. Yeah, he's on. I believe he is the writer on here. Yeah, Garth Ennis.
It's so bizarre to read like a Garth Ennis thing at all. I think they told him. I think they said, Garth, we want you to write not like yourself. Just write, what we tell you or something. I don't know.
I said, when I read it, it essentially is like, it just feels like they were like, oh man, I love The Sopranos. We should do a comic book that's like The Sopranos, but one guy's a superhero. You know what I mean, dude? Like,
right? Yeah,
like that was the impetus
but
of
I mean,
the Darkness.
Garth,
like.
Yeah. But Garth Ennis, he's known for his Preacher and his Boys,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's always weird, sexual, pseudo-sexual, pseudo-disgusting
yeah.
stuff.
I
And
don't know. I don't know where the
there isn't anything
darkness
like
fits
that.
in that. Maybe it was just they backed a dump truck of money to him, and we're like, "Hey, please write the darkness for him," and he just phoned it in. You
Maybe.
know what I mean? Like, it's not like you could
Yeah.
be like everything can be your like most inspirational piece or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
same time, you kind of want to hope that like people don't take something unless they're going to be serious about really trying to do something good with it. Putting their back into it. You know what I mean? But this is insane. Like that's such a gorgeous cover, dude. Like I'm just sitting here
Is that
looking
Dale
at it.
Keown?
Yeah, this is the Del Keown, and this is without inks. This is all just pencils
Oh,
and computer coloring.
there's no inking at all, even on the cover and on the
No,
interiors?
yeah, it's all
Huh.
just pencils with computer coloring on it.
Really?
And I mean,
The hair's awfully black.
it's computer coloring, dude. Like right here, dude. Written by Paul Jenkins, penciled by Del Keown, colored by Matt Miller. That's it.
Huh. Yeah, maybe because that hair is super. It's like it's not
Well,
penciled, so maybe they added
Del Keown probably went in and like
some.
color like penciled that stuff dark. You know what I mean? And then they just
Maybe.
go over and reformat it with the Photoshop or whatever they're doing this with. You know what I mean? And just get it real dark. Because I mean, it's crazy. I mean that they could get to. Like I said, I want to say it's like it's so good. I think it reaches a point where like the inker could detrimentally. You know what I mean? Like, look at like dude, like the level of detail in this junk and like this, like you know what I mean? Like just like a page like this is like it's like you look at it and you don't really like, especially if you're not an artist, like you don't understand the daunting nature of something like this. Like this whole page is like, this figure right here is about 25 minutes of work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
This whole everything else is going to take
like
you
3
days. Yeah, it's 3 days worth of work. You know what I mean? Of just drawing debris and garbage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a mind. That's a mind. It breaks your brain when you have to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people don't understand how hard it is to sit there and spend 3 days drawing rubble. It's brutal.
Yeah.
And then the thing is like say when I do something like this, if I'm going to take it to this level as a pencil, the odds are that I'm just going to ink it instead of penciling it this far. You know what I mean? I'm going to get it. I'm going to get the areas tight, right? And then I'm just going to go in and ink right on top of it as fast as I can because I can't spend 3 days drawing this and then spend another 4 days inking it. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I totally understand. But you'll have the light pencils, right, on the main points you want to hit. What makes me crazy is that some people will not even do any pencils and they'll just go into the inks. Like Bernie Wrightson, I know he would do that, and that's just crazy.
I don't know.
No
That's a level
no
of
pencils
skill.
at all.
Yeah, that's a level of skill I can't imagine. It's really, like, his Frankenstein stuff is so outrageous. You know what I mean? Like, that's always what I think of when I think of Bernie Wrightson. It's just like the man who was capable of those Frankenstein things, which are, like a high watermark for me. Now, I know it's ridiculous, but like, and I've shown those to you in the past, but like, that Man of War thing I'm working on slowly and my background. Like, I'm only like, I've got like 18 pages of it drawn, and I've only managed to ink like, I think 5.5 pages so far because I spend hours and hours and hours on every panel, like in that thing. And that is like my Frankenstein, you know what I mean, dude? Like it kind of is like my Frankenstein, and I ink all that. Like it's in a slightly different format. I do it all on cardboard and on Bristol, because the cardboard is more resilient and it slides easier. So I can create longer lines and get like more cleaner and crisper lines that way, And one of these days I'll pull those out and I'll feature it on the show. We'll go over
that would be cool. That'll definitely be cool.
I mean, I know I'm not reaching it realistically. It's like I'm not stupid. I know I'm not Bernie Wrightson. I will never be able to.
Hey, you gotta try.
In those works, I aspire to try and be that good. You know what I mean? Like, whatever.
It is Dale Keown's stuff. There looks so different than his other work.
Oh yeah, he's really evolved by this point, dude. Like he's really evolved. And I think, he's also pulling, he's trying to do that Top Cow style a little bit as well, you know.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
he's not cross hatching as hard as like he used to. And most of it is in this, like, most of the detail is created through this, like, this sort of ladder stepping of shadows against form. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like where you
yeah,
have these dark spots and then light spots and dark spots and light spots. And that's how the like shapes are being created. Like, dude, like, you know, well, people can see like this hand right here, you know, and it's
yeah.
just
That's
like,
crazy.
just like all made up of these dark spots and light spots and dark spots and light spots, you know, that are just happening, you know,
Yeah,
again and again and again. And it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know,
Like the
there's no,
interweaving.
yeah, there's no cross hatching or anything, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's just like this interweaving of light and dark forms, you know. And
yeah,
he's doing
yeah,
that a lot again and again and again. Like, see him standing in the rubble. Once the rubble is made up of all these just light spots and dark spots, light spots and dark spots, you know what I mean?
yeah. That's amazing. But
It
it's
really is.
I feel like his older work, like this stuff that I'm looking at, the Dragon Force, he he obviously is John Byrne inspired, but it, of what I have, which is syndrome, and he doesn't seem to have that head syndrome at all on that
Well, you
darkness that
know,
you're
I
looking at.
mean, like, you know, everybody talks about how, like, you know, you always hear the kayfabe guys, like back in the day, they'd always talk about how they like it when the artists are first coming in raw and they don't have all their edges worn away. Because it's just like, dude, it's like pounding the art, you know, is the only way to get to where you could do a piece that looks like this. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah.
that's
That's super
yeah,
Wrightson
that's
inspired.
crazy, dude. You know what I mean? Like, this is where he's at now, and it's 10
Yeah.
years, you know, it's 10, probably 15 years later than that Dragon Force thing. You know what I mean?
What year did that come out?
That's a really great question. What year is that Dragon Force?
This is 89.
Where is the thing on this? Hold on, give me a second.
I bet that's 98.
Find it here. Editor Scott, editor, Chief Jews, California.
I disagree with the kayfabe guys. I like to see the newer stuff. I mean, I do like the old original raw stuff that they do, but when you're settling in, you finally settle into your style and you settle it. You know, you've gotten those. It's like Ed used to say, every artist has 1,000 bad pages in them. I think I've got a little bit more, but you know, after you see those 1,000 pages are gone, that's when artist kind of comes through. I think.
This is 2003. Oh, I finally found it.
2003. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for sure,
So
dude.
12 years later.
I think you know, just like draw, like, you know, definitely for me, you know, because like I've only been drawing again for about coming up on 5 years, I guess, about 4.5 years since I started back up at like whatever 2021 or something like that, I think is when I started up again. And I mean, like I still have like all the ticks that kind of like you know, you still fight against that. I mean, I still find I fight against the things that the weird things I've always done that kind of like I feel like have held me back. Like I make the figures long sometimes, like, and I still do that. Like I still elongate arms and I still elongate the torso too much sometimes, or you know, like there's just things, you know, I'll still do these same kind of like weird necks sometimes that look a little like long and weird, like goose-like or whatever, you know what I mean? And the head, you know, is like always an issue. Like man, you know, like every time, like I tell you, like every time I put a head down, like the first thing I do is like shrink it twice, you know what I mean? Because I know like instinctually my heads are just always a little bit too big, and you know, you just this ticks like, you know, but everybody does it. Like I was watching a thing with Steve Rude, and he's the Nexus guy, and everybody knows how good he is. And he was just like, he's like, I hate drawing hands. It's like, I'm terrible at it. He goes like, if you look, I'm always trying to hide my hands. And he's like, they're just not very good. And he's like, so I look at a lot of other artists' hands and I borrow hands. He's like, here's a big sheet of hands I've drawn from a dozen other artists. A lot of times when I need a hand, I just come over here and I look at one of these hands and I borrow a hand. He's like, because I drew all these from someone else's hands, you know. And he's like, I'm just not very good at hands. You know, it's like, yeah, I get it. Like,
Well, see, that's the thing about working for a real big publishing company like Marvel or DC or whatever, is that you have an editor that can call you out on stuff. It's like you were saying, your daughter calls you out on stuff sometimes when
Yeah,
in your art and stuff.
yeah.
So, the only way you're going to get better is not by doing the same old thing every time, every issue, every panel. You're not
Making
going to
that
get
same
any
mistake
better
again
if you
and
don't.
again and again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You do the same mistakes over and over again, you're not going to get better. You have to challenge yourself. That is a great panel right there.
Dude, is that not a
That's
great, like that
awesome.
Mama
Yeah,
Celeste, looking Italian lady? That's what I mean
yeah.
when I say like,
That is
he's always been
fantastic.
so good with the characters. And then like this book, it's like I said, it's like The Sopranos, but like one of
Yeah,
the hitmen is a monster, you know what I
right,
mean, or a
right,
superhero,
right. But you
and it's
compare
just got
that.
all these goomba faces all through it, like this guy
Yeah,
right here, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah. You compare that stuff to this Dragon Force, and I like this Dragon Force art, but it's nothing compared to that
you know
darkness
what?
stuff that you're looking
Dragon
at.
Force is so charming though, dude, because it's just like any like when you like I just love when I see people's made up superheroes or homemade
Right,
superheroes or whatever,
right.
you know what I mean? Because that's all Thor and Superman and all those characters are. They're just somebody's homemade superheroes that we've
Yeah,
come to embrace as our mythologies. But it's so much fun when people bring in their fourth grade creations and start to play with them on the same level,
yeah,
as the other
yeah,
guys or whatever.
yeah,
And I loved Dragon Force when it came out, dude. I loved how the crippled wheelchair guy had the
yeah.
RoboCop suit that he wore that made him like, he was like their tank, and
Right, right.
the guy put the like the dragon costume he wears is like looks like a dragon, but it is dragon skin, and it gives him the strength of a dragon, and he could fly and he could breathe fire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But there's definitely a level of skill in that darkness that he didn't have
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, it's
while
not
he was
even
doing
comparable.
this.
He's like a completely different artist at this point. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
he's just
yeah,
grown into something like, and it's almost untouchable stuff. You know, I mean, like it's so hard to get to this kind of level, and even if you get there, it can be very hard to maintain it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And
yeah.
continue
He's
working at
he's
this
he's
level.
learned he's learned some quietness.
Yeah,
He's not all about the big muscles and the stuff like that. He's learned some nuances.
especially when
That's
you
what he's
compare
got.
this up to like the Pit, which is such a heavy
Yeah,
metal book where
right.
every issue of the Pit, he's smashing things to bits and breaking down bikes, and you know what I mean, and kicking
Yeah,
people
yeah,
up.
and that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. It's just that I like that darkness stuff much more.
I mean, this is
It's
beautiful
less
work.
it's less stylistic,
Yeah,
wouldn't you
yeah, I
say?
think you're right. Yeah, it has more of a. I feel like it's more like it's pulled back on the detail. So I think the first thing my mind thinks is like slightly more like animated or whatever. The look is
Yeah,
slightly more like leaning towards like animated kind of look or whatever, which clearly it is. And there's so much detail here, but it's like it
right.
looks like it's a little influenced by like how popular like Scott Campbell was at the time, you know what I mean? Because Scott Campbell's like the big seller, like everybody loves freaking all his sexy girls that he draws or whatever,
Right,
I
right,
mean, and
right.
that's what made his
One
bread and
one
butter.
thing that he definitely has kept from this Dragon Force onto that, he's a great designer. Like he
Yeah,
does different panel variations, different, he's got this bird's eye view. He's using a lot of different techniques and stuff, and everything
yeah,
is really three-dimensional. Even
yeah. His
even from
storytelling has
this.
always been good. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
like, and he's got these great little panels and stuff. You know what I mean? Where
yeah,
just tons of detail and a lot of information are happening in very small areas. He's another really. He was one of the. I mean, he
lots.
could have been one of the original Image guys, and essentially he was. It's not like he's one of the founders, but did the Pit
Right,
have any less impact than what I mean than Spawn or Savage Dragon or any
right.
of those? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But he definitely has a lot of depth. But hey, let's get into Mark Silvestri, the other winner.
yeah, they're both amazing. Like
Yeah, yeah,
Mark Silvestri's work is like it's reached a bizarre apex at this point to where it's like it could be almost hard. Like I wish I had like the Batman what is it? Batman Joker Deadly Duo that just came out last year or earlier this
Oh,
year or something like that.
I don't know about that. This is the first issue that he did the interiors for.
Is that
I
the
don't
first X-Men on the inside?
first X-Men he did the interiors. I don't know if he did covers before this. But this is the first interiors that he did.
I mean, he's such an extraordinary artist, dude. Like, and even at that early stage, you could just tell that he's gonna be something special. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's cool that you have both of those early pieces for these artists or whatever, because they're both examples.
This is 1987. What's the year on that?
Oh, this is way later than that. Let's see here. This is
what is that again? Is that Darkness one?
This is Darkness #1. This is 1996.
Yeah.
So almost 10 years. 9 years between them, you know.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, after he's adopted the Jim Lee thing, you know what I mean? It's like when he sees like how Jim Lee is blowing up, he starts to push himself into that direction. And that's really when people start to just think he's amazing. And you always hear the Image guys talk about how everybody always knew that Mark was the best artist. And Mark was also a big part of like why Jim Lee, you know, signed on or whatever, you know what I mean? Because like at first he talks about how he was a little hesitant because he was just a little hesitant because he's a money guy, you know. I mean, his parents are doctors. He it was really all about making a living for him, and you know, it was like, you know, if my books could sell to this point, you know, then I'm going to be fine or whatever. And then I guess Youngblood #1 came out, and then it double exceeded what everybody was looking for. And then he goes, so I had that. He goes, that was a big flag that was telling me to do it. He goes, and then Mark came on, and he goes, and I always felt like Mark was, you know, like, you know, between him and I, he goes, we're the strongest guys there. And he goes, I wanted to have another person there that was like, that was on the level that I admired, you know what I mean?
Right.
You know, he's not looking at Todd McFarlane and thinking he's rad, and he's not looking at freaking Liefeld and thinking, oh, he's awesome, you know. He's looking at those guys and thinking, I'm better than both of these dudes, you know.
Right. One of the things about Silvestri working on the X-Men or starting on the X-Men or whatever is he had to kind of go into Chris Claremont's world, and Claremont is a heavy writer. Like he's got like, look at this panel, look at these two panels. Like what are you supposed to put with all of that wall of text, you know?
Dude,
but he does a great job.
You just pray there's nothing there, and you know there's a moon over there, or there's rocks, or there's a whole tree that's just gone. You know what I mean? You know, like, yeah, that's brutal. You know, and I'm a guy who like, I write, and I don't know if anyone would call it purple, but like, you know, like purple prosy. Because I don't describe things. I'm not a guy who's all like, oh, you know, I'm leaping over the car now, and I hope I could punch this guy strong enough. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I've never been a guy who does that. Like, I write things like from a novel narrative style or whatever. You know what I mean? So oftentimes, like, I might not even be like speaking directly of what's taking place on the page. Like the things on the page will be taking place, but you might be speaking metaphorically of something, you know, that is exemplative of what is happening, as opposed to saying like the actual occurrences or whatever, you know, like
right. Well, if you're a good narrative artist, I feel like the writer shouldn't have to, like, if you have a character tripping, the writer shouldn't have to say, oh, I tripped, you know. He shouldn't have to write that should be in the art.
You should just be going like, oh, like, you know, this moment is happening, oh my god, he's doing this, you know, like, you know what I mean, or whatever. You just kind of tell it to the pros, like, because I'm writing that Crom stuff right now. And like I really was trying to keep it in a Robert E. Howard sort of like context, you know, the way it's written or whatever, you know, and like speech and the speak or whatever, you know. So that's kind of fun doing that right now. And it's the same thing. It's like you don't want to just be like, oh, he threw the spear and it kills the bad guy.
Right. Exactly. But at the same time, it also, when you do stuff like that, when you write what you've already drawn and stuff, it kind of hits home with what you're trying to say. So there is something to be said like that. So like one of the things that I realize about and I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but in Stephen King movies or shows or whatever, they always say, whenever a character is talking to another character, they always say their first and last name.
Oh, I never even
So
know. You're probably right. I mean, now that you bring
yeah,
that to my attention, I could definitely say you're right. About that. Like, yeah,
yeah. So it drives home. This is this character. You're not going to forget him because I'm going to say his name over and
I
over
think
again.
I do
And
that.
that's also a tech.
Yeah, to a certain
Yeah,
extent,
yeah,
I try to like mix it up. I'll be like, Crom this, Crom that. The
right,
barbarian
right,
did. Oh, the barbarian.
right,
Then I'll Crom. This or whatever, like that kind of thing. And even
right,
one we're doing on right now, the Entropy Alliance, it'll be like, you know, oh, instantly his mind eye is flooded with this, and that, and then Superion thinks to himself, what would I do to have this? Then next
right,
he turns. So it'll always
right,
be like
right.
once I'll say the name, and then I'll use like
Yeah,
an
yeah.
inflective to represent or whatever, that kind of thing, but
Right,
then come back
right,
to the
right,
name and come back to
right.
reflective.
That's a technique people use when you're trying to remember somebody's name. If you first, like, I have a hard time remembering
Sure,
people's
you
names
say the name a
if I
couple
meet them.
times and you go, hey, nice to
Just,
meet you, Mark. It's good to see you, Mark. Hey, have a great
just
day,
say their
Mark. Or
name.
whatever.
Yep.
Like, yeah.
You're
Yeah.
shaking their hand and you just say their name, and
Yeah,
whenever you get a
I'm bad at
chance to say
names
their
too,
name.
dude. Don't feel bad. I work in a
Yeah,
big factory with a lot of people, and it's like I'll be, hey, what's up, bro? You know what I mean? Because I can't
yeah,
remember names half the time.
yeah, yeah.
Like
It's
too many people.
amazing. It's amazing the different, like, this is very standard panels. Like they're almost, well, this isn't so much. This has a lot of panels, but even the amount of panels, they're they're left and right. They're not disc-shaped or anything. I certainly like the different types of panels that you're looking at with the darkness
I
there.
think at this point, you know what I want to say? I think the ingredient that's been put into his pot of stew at this point is Mike Magnolia.
Could be, yeah.
I think it
But
is,
just
dude, because
the
like
panel
he
variation
starts to
for
bring
every
all
artist.
these like shape things into it, like that didn't exist in his work before. You know what I mean? He starts to bring like
Yeah,
the silhouette stuff in from time to time. Like,
yeah.
and that stuff really didn't like exist in his work, I don't think, before like the Mike Magnolia stuff. You know what I mean? And he really
No,
integrates it
no.
really well because it's not really, he's not really doing the Magnolia thing. He's just adding that one tiny element that kind of like defines Magnolia's work or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And he's just adding it in as a tiny spice in his work. Like when you look at stuff like this, you know what I mean, where it
yeah,
has these big, broad, shadows across it or whatever that are very
yeah,
Magnolia
yeah.
inspired, looking things.
Yeah, there's none of that. There's no heavy black spotting
No,
in
that's what
any
I
of this
mean. Like
stuff.
none of that stuff. Like, see, like this silhouette of this building right here, this little area, that's very Magnolia. You know what I mean? Where it's
Yeah,
just the shape and
yeah.
then just
Oh,
the
definitely.
windows, set across it or whatever. Like, because it delivers. That's what he's really great at. Is is delivering a lot of information just by layering shapes on top of shapes. Like that's Magnolia's gig, you know what I mean? Like he's like always
Yeah,
been so good at that. Like he just lays, a rectangle and then you have squares, black rectangle with squares across it, you know what I mean? And then some gates in front of it, like some, you know what I mean? Some pointy gates or whatever. And then put a
yeah,
lamp on the side and then all of a sudden you're looking at a mansion, you know what I mean? And your brain starts putting the informative pieces together or whatever. And he hasn't done that much work to get it there, a lot of the time.
right.
But you can
I was
see
gonna
like
say,
this is a
what's
really
that?
good example. I just want to bring up like this, like, okay, so here's like David Finch. I think this is Hooligan, Finch, and Williams, okay. But this is like somebody who's like, they are like, obviously with like a lot me as well, like Mark Silvestri is like their impetus or whatever, and they're building off of that. But you can see how they get like, they're trying too hard, like right off the back, their detail is like way heavier than what Mark is doing. You know what I mean? They're probably
Yeah,
putting way more time into some of this stuff. Mark is getting to this stuff, but he's getting through it fast. You know what I mean? He gets to that level, you know what I mean, of really brilliant art and figure. But I guarantee you, he's not spending as much time as this dude did on this figure or like this stuff back here. You know, I mean, he's probably knocking his stuff out way faster than this guy's probably spending days and days getting this one page finished. You know what I mean?
Hey, Wiley says, hello, gentlemen. Sylvester rules. Hey, Wiley.
Oh, hey, good to see you, bro.
Welcome to the show. Who do you like, or Keone? Because that's who we're looking at. Two of the winners from the previous polls.
Like, and why do you think like which one is better than the other? It's like I don't even know if I could say Keone or Silvestri. I mean, I want to say Silvestri, obviously, just because he's the one that, I mean, like I've defined a lot, and I could show my art, and you can see a lot of his stuff in my art or whatever. But Keone, fantastic too, and it's just like I think the only reason why I'm a little bit more ruled by Silvestri is just because like my affinity for the team book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that he, you know, he did Cyberforce and Wolverine and X-Men, you know, and those are all, you know, team things or whatever. And I love that, you know, and that, and that Keone only did the Pit, you know, that's really, because before Pit, he had only worked on the Hulk as far as I was aware, you know, I mean, I didn't even really place him as the guy from Dragon Force till years later. You know what I mean? It was years later going through my collection where I realized he was the guy from Dragon Force, and then you go, "Oh wow, like I see it now."
Isn't that a great realization?
Isn't
that awesome?
It's super cool when that happens. Let's see, Willie's saying Silvestri is better storytelling, but both are top tier. No, I think that's pretty fair. But I think also like I think that's got to be a comparison at the beginning of their careers, because I think by now their storytelling components are probably both pretty equal. I want to say, I don't know if one's better than the other.
I definitely think Silvestri's more dynamic, but Keone has a little bit more nuance to him. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about
really who I like better. In similar directions, because like if you look at Silvestri's latest work, it is very reminiscent of this stuff being all built of like dark spots and light spots and dark spots and light spots, as opposed to like, I mean, he does a lot of line work. He always will. He does that sort of like Franklin Booth style, you know, that's made up of tons of like, it's not even always just cross hatching it. I mean, it's just like, I guess it is technically cross hatching. I guess that's what it is. But a lot of time he's just using heavy line to light line to define, you know, things like light and, you know, and stuff like that. And it's not like lines don't even always cross that much. You know what I mean? It'll just be like long lines defining, you know, the haze of something or whatever.
Right.
But I mean, and then, they both got into spots where they do all this light and dark stuff to really define their figures and things like that. You know?
And you also have to kind of wade through their different inkers too.
Well, on the works I'm talking about right now, that they either ink themselves or, you know, like I said, this piece doesn't have an inker. I know Marc Silvestri inked himself on the piece I'm speaking of right now, the Batman Joker Deadly Duo. It's a 6-issue like maxi series that, you know, it took him 6 years to make. He worked on it for 6 years, so it took him essentially a year for each issue, and they're stunning. The work in them is outrageous. They're gorgeous. I don't have them. I've only like seen them online and stuff, because like the whole run sold out like the first month it was out or whatever. And I don't know if they've reprinted it yet or how you get a hold of them when they're going to do that or whatever. You know what I mean? But it's gorgeous stuff, dude. Like, you know, just beautiful looking work. It looks better in black and white than it does in color, I think. You know, the color is probably doesn't work that great on it, because like because they're like DC is leaning towards this very digital thing with all of its coloring now. Like they do a lot of like graphic work where they put a lot of like they add a lot of like zipatone effects when they're coloring. Like that isn't on the work, you know, like it isn't on the gray and the black and white pages or whatever, but when they come into color, like they'll add a lot of zipatone effects to the lightning and to lighting and stuff like that, and it doesn't really work that well with Mark's work, because Mark's work is so not digital at all. You know what I mean? It's so hand drawn. You know, it's a little hard to apply some of those digital ideas to them in the coloring level without muddying the work up.
Wiley says if you can find early Silvestri King Conan, check it out and see how quick he improved. That's what we were talking about. We were trying to figure out what Conan was that he had started in on, because Joe was saying he thought it was Savage Sword, but I guess it's King Conan.
Sword. That makes sense. But you know, because he was talking about how it was like his things were Walter Simonson and Buscema or whatever. And it's like, that's why he went out of his way to get Walter Simonson to do the Cyberforce Zero or whatever, because that was like, he threw a bucket of money at him because that was his hero.
Yeah, it's always cool to work with your hero.
Yeah, that's the same reason why Jim Lee has Barry Windsor Smith on all those like Wildstorm crossover covers or whatever, freaking, because like he was such a big, Barry Windsor Smith.
Yeah.
It's so weird to see Barry Windsor Smith drawing the Wildcats or whatever, like totally bizarre, like does not fit at all, but they're still badass.
Yeah, it's definitely awesome. He's another one. Eventually, we're going to have awesome polls. Like we're going to do Arthur Adams and Barry Windsor Smith. How do you choose? How do you choose that?
That's brutal. I don't know if anyone could make that one, dude. Like,
or like a Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'd take Jim Lee over Todd McFarlane every day for me personally.
Well,
but,
I was thinking
guy. His art was really
I was thinking about that. Like you have Lightfield, and they come out with X-Force, and it sells like so many copies. And then Todd McFarlane comes out with Spider-Man #1, it sells like even more. And then Jim Lee comes out with X-Men #1 and sells even more. So do you think that's an indication of popularity of the artist, or do you think that's just...
I don't know.
It is what it is.
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know if I can answer that honestly, because that's right about the time I was coming back to comics. Like, that's right about the time when I was, because like I had collected my whole childhood, but then like when I was a teenager, I got into music and, surfing and skating and all this stuff. And I, put all that other stuff on the back burner. And then right about the time when I discovered Jim Lee, and I think it was really Jim Lee it was Jim Lee and it was Tim Vigil. I want to say those are probably the two guys that like slowly brought me back to the table or whatever, And I'd been collecting a little bit, like following the Elric stuff at first, you know what I mean? And just kind of dabbling in it here or there because I love comics, and I always liked it. Just didn't seem like there was very much happening that I was very interested in at the time, But when I can recall seeing Jim Lee's stuff in the X-Men for the first time and then being like, whoa. And then seeing Whilst Portatious stuff. And I thought they were the same guy for a minute there. You know what I mean? And then I realized that Whilst was a different dude and like that he could just draw like Jim and that there were just two different guys that had a style that was that outrageously evolved, And then like, because like, I was like, I grew up watching like Speed Racer and Battleship Yamamoto and, Robotech, you know what I mean? And it was, and then like, I'm also a kid who grew up with like Neil Adams and like George Perez, and those were like the two like heavy hitters for like us when we were kids growing up. Like even Jim Lee will talk about that. Like those are the was John Byrne or whatever, you know what I mean? And like it's like dominoes like knocking over or whatever. But it's like when I saw Jim Lee, like you see all that stuff in him, you know what I mean? Like Jim Lee was like
100%.
Yeah, he like took like, everything. Like he took like Neil Adams and he took George Perez, and then he took Robotech and all that stuff too, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And put
Michael Golden.
Yeah, and Michael Golden, yeah, dude, and it all and Arthur Adams. And Arthur Adams popped up, and put all those things together, and that's what Jim Lee is, you know what I mean? And it's wildly cool. I loved it when I saw it for the first time. I was so blown away, and that was definitely one of the things that brought me back to the table. And then afterwards, I discovered McFarlane, and and was like, oh, this guy's dope too, you know what I mean? And slowly came back to it like that, and then you're like, oh shit, I could be doing this. These guys are all making millions, man. I was supposed to be a comic. What do I do? Like, and then I started drawing.
Yeah. So I think we should start winding down a little bit. So there we go. We've got Silvestri versus Keown in the next artist poll, and so go ahead and cast your vote as soon as the videos are up and the polls are up and all that cool stuff. And
and once again,
you want to send us on our merry way?
It doesn't matter if you guys like just vote for who you love, and it's all good. It doesn't matter who wins or loses. You know, like I love Mark Silvestri. I would have been devastated if he didn't make it through the first round. I loved El Keon too. Like
Yeah.
I would, like I was rad when he made it through the first round. I mean, these guys are all amazing artists. We're just doing this for fun, and it's just cool to sit and because we want to talk about these artists and we want to look at their work and we want to like understand between ourselves and everybody else why we admire them and the things that we love, and maybe break down psychologically what it is that we want to extrude and put into our own and stuff like that. Because Alex and I are comic book creators. I'm the creator of Six Lords of Sound. It's a comic book I spent 2 years putting together because I wanted to make something rad and put out something in the world that conveyed my thoughts and my ideas. And that's one of the wonderful things about comic books is there is no budget for it and there is no limitation. Whatever you want to put on the page, or you've got a screenplay in your head that you've been thinking the world desperately needs to see and know about, and that's what comic books are there for. It unleashes the imagination of the person who stops and takes the time to create. And that's why at the end of our stories we always say keep on creating, because it's the most important thing people do, and we love it when we see other people's comics. As a matter of fact, next I believe it's going to be next Saturday's stream, we're going to be looking over the work of Dan Goodwin, the creator of Sundays in Space. I'm going to see if I can't get in contact with Dan and maybe have him be able to be available to answer us some questions through the chat. And we love talking comic books with you guys. Alex is a comic book creator. He's a comic book artist, and he's a comic book publisher. So if you're interested in having your comics published, you could contact Alex, and he could definitely help you out for a very reasonable price. We just love sharing our time with you and love sharing comics. If you took the time to watch this video to the very end, we super appreciate it. Please take the time to like, follow, and subscribe to Alex's show. And Alex is going to close it out for us right now.
I produce a regular comic book every month. I'm up to issue 30. 30 is coming out this month, and it's called Random Access. It's a full-size, full-color comic book, and you can get this. It's 12 pages. You can get this at my patreon.com/Alexander Turbin, or you can go to my website, alexanderturbin.com, or you can go to Instagram and alexturbin04401, or email me at alexturbin04401@yahoo.com. And so, yep, but the best way is probably alexanderturbin.com. So, like I said, I'm up to issue 30. So, watching, and like you said, hit that subscription button, and we really appreciate it, and all that cool stuff, notification bell, and all that stuff. And so, like at the end of all of our episodes, we say, keep on creating.